Welcome, everyone. This is Dr. Clark in the Center for Weight Loss Success. And today on Losing Weight USA, we're going to talk about carbohydrate sensitivity and insulin resistance, one of my favorite topics, and kind of how do you control insulin levels. I kind of hit on that a little bit almost every week, I suspect. So we're going to hit really kind of what I call the high points here, kind of what is carbohydrate sensitivity, what is insulin resistance, and really kind of get into some of the details there. All right, welcome to Losing Weight USA, real-time answers to your weight loss questions, as well as a little bit of expert advice. Gives you direct access not only to me, but you should be receiving the health tips and recipes via the membership portal. Each webinar will last about 30 minutes or so. If you have questions, type them into the chat box as we go along. We'll get to them at the end. If you think of things once we're all done, just give us a yell here at the Center for Weight Loss Success. Email is success@cfws.com. Phone number 757-873-1880, which you can also text to as well. All right, let's see. We're going to get the slides flipped around here. All right, very good. So what we're talking about again, insulin resistance, carbohydrate sensitivity, insulin resistance, and kind of what does that mean for everyone? Okay, I'm going to get into the details here. Well, just as an overview, kind of two of three Americans are overweight. Okay, I think that's fairly well-known statistics at this point. One of two of these people are considered obese. So obviously, kind of weight and health has become a very epidemic proportion problem. Okay, part of the problem there is that the higher someone's weight is, the higher their risk of developing diabetes. And if you're overweight, the risk of developing diabetes is about 80% higher than a normal weight person. Okay, that's significant. About 50% of Americans that are thought to actually be insulin resistant. So that's 50%, half the population. And this insulin resistance is a stepping stone to diabetes. Kind of goes from carbohydrate sensitivity, insulin resistance to subsequent and true diabetes itself. Okay, and it's estimated that a good 1 to 2 million Americans will be diabetic in the next 20 years or so. But this doesn't actually happen overnight. This is something that occurs over an extended period of time. All right, so what is carbohydrate sensitivity then? Carbohydrate sensitivity basically means that you're not kind of processing carbohydrates as efficiently and as effectively as you should. Okay, so what is the problem then? And it occurs when there's a delay in the normal insulin response, and typically from a carbohydrate meal. When I mean there's a delay, so normally the normal response should be, hey, I have some carbohydrate, insulin levels go up a little bit, and subsequently then keeps your blood sugars in that appropriate range. Okay. If there's a delay in the insulin response, though, it's because, okay, I have some carbohydrate. We expect the insulin to go up somewhat, but it doesn't. Okay, and what happens then is you get a big spike in the blood sugar. And now, once you get a big spike in the blood sugar, now you get a big an over spike of the insulin response. And so kind of this large blood sugar spike is followed by an overcompensation. There's an overcompensation spike of the release of insulin. So you get a big insulin spike. And subsequently, that big insulin spike now makes the blood sugars plummet. And once the blood sugars plummet, then it produces symptoms, two common problems. One is symptoms, that the other is weight gain. So insulin spikes then result in a blood sugar fall, which is what should happen, okay? You just don't want to have a big spike there from it. And this causes symptoms, fatigue, dizziness, irritability, kind of inability to concentrate, kind of that brain fog, shakiness, headaches, hunger, and cravings. All really common symptoms. And they happen when blood sugars plummet. And they typically happen not due to the actual blood sugar number, but to how fast is the blood sugar coming down. Now, the treatment for this is lowering that carbohydrate intake, and the exercise can also help improve this as well. But it's really, really common. At least 2/3 of the population, all the population is carbohydrate sensitive. But it's also true that at least 95% of my patient population, because realize I see a skewed patient population. I'm not seeing the average everyday Joe out there. My patients are here to see for weight loss. So they've kind of made a significant jump in that, hey, I want to be treated for weight loss. Subsequently, that's the end of the spectrum that I'm seeing. So close to 95% of my patient populations are very sensitive to carbohydrates. That's probably the number one thing that we see. Now, the issue there is carbohydrate sensitivity can subsequently lead to the next step, which is insulin resistance. So the next step in this continuum is insulin resistance. Start with carbohydrate sensitivity. There's a delay in the normal insulin response. Now we're kind of moving on to insulin resistance, where it's kind of, it takes really high insulin levels. And part of that is because as your cells are exposed to higher blood sugars from that kind of blood sugar swings, it begins to require even more insulin to keep the blood sugars in a normal range. And it's these higher insulin levels that may go undetected for many years, because typically what you get checked is your blood sugar, right? And your blood sugar may stay fine, but if it's taking a whole bunch of insulin to keep them fine, that may be undetected. And part of the problem there is that it's this high insulin levels that tend to cause many, many problems. So these higher insulin levels can go undetected literally for many, many years, but it's the high insulin levels that tend to worsen other health problems. So if it takes a lot of insulin to keep those blood sugars decent, which is typically what you're getting checked, your blood sugars, other things tend to happen then, because high insulin levels leads to high blood pressure, water retention, increased cholesterol and triglycerides, worsening inflammatory conditions, which is basically heart disease, but also any inflammatory conditions such as arthritis and that. And then finally, what I see most commonly is abdominal fat storage, because it turns on fat storage, right? Which then means weight gain. Right? Eventually, though, with this insulin resistance, though, your body is unable to keep up with the blood sugars in a decent range. And subsequently now, all of a sudden, the blood sugars are drifting up too. And this is what diabetes is, kind of higher blood sugars. But it's all related to the high insulin levels. So before you truly get to, quote, diabetes, we often will label this as pre-diabetes, kind of a clinician standpoint, kind of pre-diabetes. It occurs when insulin no longer can keep the blood sugars in the normal range, so blood sugars then start drifting up. And when these fasting normal ranges, excuse me, when these fasting normal ranges get into that 100 to 125, that level is considered pre-diabetes. Normal is generally kind of in that 65 to 100 range. Now, if you think about it, if it's just kind of slowly fading up, towards that 100 range, and even when you go in to see your physician and say, oh, your blood sugars now are kind of 90, but that's okay, or 95, that's okay. And all of a sudden at 100, we say that's not okay. And it's like, okay, is there's really a line in the sand, or are these really shades of gray? And we should actually be addressing this at lower numbers. But we kind of put that label of pre-diabetes when the fasting blood sugars are between 100 and 125. All right, so then that next stepping stone truly is diabetes. And if we're talking about type 2 diabetes, type 2 diabetes is different than type 1 diabetes. Type 1 diabetes, you make no insulin, and therefore blood sugars run real high. Type 2 diabetes is you're resistant to the insulin, and you make actually lots and lots of insulin. Insulin levels are typically very high, but blood sugars, okay, they're starting to drift up above normal and subsequently into that diabetic range. When we say diabetic range, typically is fasting levels in that 125 or more. And this occurs again over many, many years. So after many years, the pancreas cannot make enough insulin. Insulin levels may be way up here, and the body becomes so resistant to the insulin that blood sugars can't be adequately controlled. And then these uncontrolled blood sugars then also cause different problems. So the insulin by itself causes a big problem, but actually uncontrolled or high blood sugars cause a big problem too. From heart disease, kidney disease, all kinds of vascular problems that are in there. It's the elevated insulin levels that really were kind of starting this off. And this can also then, obviously, the elevated insulin levels also worsen other problems. So high blood sugar is causing problems too, but the insulin levels, that may be actually in the long run, maybe even actually more problems, because the insulin stimulates fat storage, which is weight gain, water retention, and running around with fat fingers, fat ankles, that type of thing, high blood pressure, increased cholesterol, increased triglycerides, and worsening inflammation, which inflammatory processes are really, so we learn more and more about heart disease, maybe at the real heart, so to speak, excuse the pun, of heart disease right there, the inflammation that occurs. And the problem is this all tends to snowball. And so now all of a sudden I get one problem, like cholesterol problems, blood pressure problems, water retention, I have mild heart disease, vascular problems, and subsequently it all starts to snowball because they are all playing in that same area. So what can you do about this? So what we'd like to do is prevent it from happening. And really the two key components to control this, or kind of reverse some of this effect, especially the carbohydrate sensitivity and the insulin resistance before it ever gets to that diabetes type 2, is the biggest things from an eating perspective is reduce your carbohydrate intake. It's kind of, it's the carbohydrate intake that's fueling that kind of rise in insulin levels. And so subsequently, it makes no sense to throw more carbohydrate onto that. It's like throwing gasoline on a fire. Okay? It's like, no, we can actually decrease the fuel, decrease the carbohydrate, which then subsequently, then the insulin levels will slowly come down too. And part of it is relieves the pancreas from needing to work so hard and secrete so much insulin. And kind of one of the best ways to do this is really avoiding, especially simple carbohydrates, as well as the high processed carbohydrates, and really avoiding processed foods in general. Okay? Best food has no labels on it. Okay? But the other way to do this, to help with controlling this, is attacking it from a different angle, not just dietary, but actually the activity and exercise. Exercise, we talk about all the time, helps preserve lean body mass, keeps metabolism higher, but also it really helps with insulin resistance, carbohydrate sensitivity, and it kind of makes you more sensitive to the carbohydrates. Makes your cells more sensitive to the actual insulin. Okay, not carbohydrate sensitivity. Sorry, kind of threw that. So, but the exercise really helps with them kind of preventing and actually treating this. And kind of that's what I really encourage, well, anybody should be doing exercise as well as especially weight training. Okay, the more muscle mass you have, the better off you're going to be able to utilize carbohydrates, because it's your muscle mass that actually can store some carbohydrate. Not very much, but still, kind of the more muscle mass you have, the better you can do this. So weight training is one of the best exercises to help with insulin resistance and with diabetes. All right, so really kind of coming back to the circular thing as we talk about all the time is controlling insulin levels. Controlling insulin levels obviously is very, very important. And it's really kind of key to overall health, weight being part of overall health. So it's really looking back at all the different ways to control insulin levels. And I'm just going to list them out here. We can go into detail on any single one of them, but we do this typically fairly routinely on these discussions. So controlling insulin levels, and all of these are important. And I'm going to digress here for a second. All these are important, but they may not be in the exact same order for everyone, meaning the order of importance may be different for different individuals. Now, for the patient population that I see, which is typically a significant overweight, it's going to be a carbohydrate. That's the carbohydrate amount. But reality, all these things that kind of are going to influence insulin levels. So just list them out. Low calorie. So low calorie will lower insulin levels. Okay, even if the calories were a significant amount of carbohydrate, but if it's fairly low calorie, okay, it'll actually help control insulin levels. And you have to realize that anything that has calories in it will actually raise insulin levels. So for people that are sensitive here, even if you're eating low carbohydrate, if it's just too much, if it's just too many calories, that's not going to work well, because you can raise insulin levels with any calories. And actually some things that don't have calories, artificial sweeteners specifically, can raise insulin levels. Okay? So low calorie, it's going to be part of the equation. For most of my patient populations, the most important thing is low carbohydrate. They drift on the carbohydrate, they're struggling. Everybody has a tipping point. At a certain level, they struggle. Again, say exercise, very important part of this whole thing. The more intense, the better it works. Big fan of weight training. But other things then have nothing to do with eating. Exercise obviously has nothing to do with eating. So you'll notice that some of these things on this list have nothing to do with eating, exercise being the first. But the next one is quality sleep. Poor quality sleep makes cortisol levels go up. Cortisols are chronic stress hormones. Cortisol by itself makes insulin levels go up. So quality sleep is important. Next is controlling stress. Okay? Same type of problem there is that when we have poorly controlled stress, cortisol levels go up. Cortisol by itself makes insulin levels go up. So controlling stress is also very important. So again, some of these things have nothing to do with eating, exercise, quality sleep, controlling stress. And the last one, which actually may be the most important one, is meal timing, which is where intermittent fasting come in. Obviously, we've talked about intermittent fasting. I'm a fan. I think it's very important, but the real reason is because it's actually meal timing. And what I mean by meal timing is that there needs to be not eating times. And it's really the not eating times that are most important, because during our not eating times, we have our lowest insulin levels. In our eating times, okay, and if you think about it, any 24-hour day, we should have very short periods of time that we're actually eating. Eating a little bit all throughout the day, or I know there are people that profess that you ought to be eating multiple meals, small meals throughout the day. It doesn't work. Now, it may work for a different end of the patient population, but it does not work for the patient population that I see. It's like, no, we need to have not eating times. We need to have those low insulin levels, because it's very, very important. Okay? So meal timing is very important. Intermittent fasting is a way of, just part of meal timing. That's all it is. I won't go into the details with that at this point. All right, so just some tips for success as we kind of wind this down. This one is that know your numbers. Okay, what is your fasting blood sugar? What is your hemoglobin A1C, which is kind of what has your blood sugar done on average over about a 3-month period of time? Where are your insulin levels? Okay, they can get checked. Okay, discuss them with your healthcare provider. Kind of what do these things mean? Know what your carbohydrate intake levels are. Okay, even because everyone has a tipping point. At a certain level, they struggle. So especially during maintenance, it's like you're gonna have to stay below that tipping point. Okay? Make time for exercise. Make it part of your daily routine. Again, meal timing matters. And again, try to improve quality sleep. There's lots of ways to try to do that. Controlling stress, which I realize stress isn't going away in any of our lives. It's how we react to stress. That's what really matters. How do we have those stress breakers from meditation, yoga, exercise being one of them, deep breathing, lots of different things, massage. You can list off a whole bunch of those there. And finally, just kind of avoid blood sugar swings by keeping your meals and any snacks balanced. Protein levels, we should keep protein levels for most of our patient population almost at 2-to-1 ratio, probably. It's a good thing to do. But you're definitely going to want to keep those carbohydrate levels ratcheted down. Again, everybody has that tipping point for them. All right, I don't see questions sitting out there, but this is a very, very important topic because it's a continuum that occurs over years and years and years. And it's hard to reverse. Once you've been going on for years and years and years, it's hard to completely reverse that. It's like, yeah, we can better control it. But to think that all of a sudden now we're going to be able to do it as well as we were 18, it's like, well, no, it's probably not going to happen. But still, we can improve on this. And a lot of it is knowing what to do, but also then practicing the right things. I say this over and over again. Controlling health is controlling insulin levels. And that part, it's kind of an oversimplification, but it works incredibly well. All right. If you have questions, you know where to find us here at the Center for Weight Loss Success. Just pick up the phone, 757-873-1880. Send an email, send a text. As COVID all dies down here, hopefully it really will, and we can open up the things and kind of tell people, come on by and get your body comp checked. Obviously, we harp on that as kind of protecting lean body mass. That's the point. You should be logging into the membership portal, receive the health tips as well as weekly recipes. Tune in each Tuesday, kind of 12:15 for the next webinar. Watch your email for the invite link. And remember, it's your life. Make it a healthy one. Have a good day, everyone. Take care.